Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. It is Wednesday, January 31st. Goodbye, January. Just one more month you'll never get back in your life. Yeah, and that's becoming more and more apparent as each month goes by. Where do I start? Got a lot to talk about again today. Went to town. Just thought I'd show you. I got the mailers to mail the CDs. They cost a lot more in town than they do when you order them online. I usually order them online for, like $250 at a time, and they're about, 19 cents a piece or something, or 20. That's, several years ago, so they're probably more now. But these were like, it was 12 of them for $8, and if you bought 60 of them, in other words, 5 packs, then they were $4 a pack. So I bought 60 of them, $4 a pack. Only makes sense in my mind, because I'll use them eventually. Well, anyway, the long story short, to tell you that I'll get those CDs in the mail today for those of you who have paid for your CDs. I also got a lot of text yesterday. Are you playing at Dickies tonight? Normally, I don't get any texts that if we're playing at Dickies or not. You know what I mean? I'm not kidding you. I might get one if I'm lucky. But most of the time, I don't get any texts at all. And last night, because we're not playing, I got 3 texts. Are you playing at Dickies tonight? So just to be clear, we are only playing at Dickey's Barbecue Pit now this year on the 1st and the 3rd Tuesdays of the month. If you're in the area and you can join us, we would love to have you. 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of the month only. Okay, it's just the way that Rosa luck thing goes. Like I said, it's not terrible luck. It's just, I don't know, annoying luck, maybe? Anyway, it's like, where are these people when we're playing, Doggone it anyway. Anyway, I finished up the grapple bucket yesterday. Well, the grapple bucket was done. It was just sitting there waiting for me to put it together. And so it only took 3 pins. It takes 5 minutes to put the 3 pins in. It wasn't no big deal. So I put the pins in it and hooked it up to the Bobcat. And it works just fine. All this to say is now I can put out the video on that because I've got it completed now. So there'll be a video coming before too long on the grapple bucket and how I rebuilt it. And basically, it's just like building one from scratch because that's what I did. Basically, I built it from scratch. I started with a different bucket and put the kit back on a different bucket. The bad news is it leaks at the connecting point where it plugs into the Bobcat. So the quick coupler there is leaking. Now, I already bought a brand new quick coupler and put it on the Bobcat side. So I don't know if that means that the one on the grapple bucket is bad. It doesn't seem to leak as bad as it leaked before, but it's leaking. So I'm going to have to buy yet another quick coupler, I guess, and I guess it'll be the one for the grapple bucket side and put that on. It just doesn't quit. That's all I can tell you. Always something. But my plan is, if it warms up today, to maybe, and this is just a maybe, I'm not saying I'm going to do it for sure, but I might go out there and start sawing some lumber. And that would be a good thing to do. I think that's everything I was going to cover before I get into the meat of the topic today. I'm going to try to head off the little annoyance comments. I'm sorry if that sounds negative. I don't mean for it to sound negative. It's just that I get these comments every single time I talk about jigs and fixtures. And that is, the comment is, that's not a jig, that's a fixture. That's not a fixture, that's a jig. Well, let me explain it to you like this. I don't care what you call it. I literally don't care. The only thing I care less about is what I told you yesterday. I care less about fashion than I do about what you call these jigs and fixtures, but only slightly less. I really don't care what you call them. It doesn't matter to me. To me, in fact, I call them tools. That's a more appropriate name, if you ask me, because even though they're not your traditional tool in the sense of a tool, they're still a tool. They're holding something, they're positioning something, and it's a tool you use to get the job done. So to me, they're just tools. Call them what you want, but don't bother correcting me on whether it's a jig or a fixture, because I flat don't care. Because you'd just be wasting your little typey fingers. But the question yesterday, though, really threw me for a loop. I think it was Chip Wood that asked, what's your go-to jig and why, and I'm going like, well, that's a good question, but I don't have an answer, Well, the reason I didn't have an answer is because nobody has a go-to jig, you just don't. It really has, the jig depends on the job. So if you have a job, then you have a go-to jig. So I've got a whole bunch of go-to jigs here that I'm going to show you. It's probably way more than you're going to ever want to know about jigs and fixtures or tools. We're just going to call them tools, except that I won't. I'll call them jig or fixture, and somebody's going to correct me anyway. Anyway, these are just tools. So, if I had to give one that I go to more than any of them, though, like no matter, what, well, this is probably it. It is really, really depressing, really lets you down but seriously, this is probably the thing I probably use more than anything in the shop, if you get right down to it. Every time you take strings off a guitar, which, in the heyday, I was doing that 4 or 5 times a day, I'm putting the pins in here. And, you notice I got it set up so I could put 12 pins in it if I'm working on a 12 string. But, it's not so much that you have to keep them in order, although a few guitars do care which order you put them in because they've, cut them in a certain way or they've been bent in a certain way and they won't hardly go in a different hole. And I'm sure some of you have probably run into that. So to avoid that problem, I just stick them in the appropriate hole. This would be the bass, and this is the next one, and this one's the treble, and I just stick them in that order, lay this back there on the table. The main reason for this is it keeps the pins from just going everywhere and getting lost. I mean, you can throw them in a pan or something, but I like this method. Like I said, it also, keeps them in order if the order matters, and most of the time it doesn't, but then I don't have to worry about that. And then the second thing, or the third thing maybe, is that it also lets you pick them up very easily. They're easily accessible rather than in a dish where you're fumbling through trying to pick one up. I just reach over, pick it up, stick it in the hole, So it's a handy little jig or fixture, tool. It's a handy tool. So I use this a lot, and actually I have 2 or 3 of these. So there you go. If you're a guitar repairman, I would make one of these because the dish works, but this works better, I think. They don't scatter all over the place, and you can't knock your dish over with that. I have knocked that off the table, I guess, but, in 40 years, you're going to knock everything off the table once. All right, so that's one thing. Then, again, these are not real... But in terms of how much do I use them, these would be some things I use quite a bit also. And these are just, fixtures or jigs to hold the neck still, on a guitar, like up on the workbench. Sometimes I especially use it when I'm driving in frets. I'll put this right under the fret I'm driving and drive it in. I've got them in different sizes because different guitars need different heights and things. And then sometimes I'll do this if I have to, or do this if I have to get different heights out of it. You know what I'm saying? But and those are covered with leather to keep it from. So those are just extra little silly tools like that. If I'm building a mandolin, here's my go-to jig. And this came out of the Roger Siminoff book. Now, the original Siminoff book shows drilling holes through here and making this all adjustable and come apart. And my first one, and I have another one just like this up on the wall, that is exactly like his very first jig. But I learned that I never took it apart anyway, and I never needed to take it apart. So after I took apart the Lloyd Loar mandolin, then I built this jig. And this one matches the Lloyd Loar pattern exactly. So, And if you don't know how this works or what it's for, you can turn these and it expands it, and you bend your side pieces, you put them in there, and then you press the side pieces out like this, and then you can put your blocks in there and glue your sides to your blocks. So that's what this is for. It's a tool to hold the sides still while you're gluing in the blocks. That's really what it amounts to. Okay, so like I said, that's a go-to jig when I'm building a mandolin. Here's a go-to fixture jig tool when I'm building a guitar. And the cutout in the back, it becomes handy every once in a while. It's not handy all the time, but it's handy every once in a while. When you, like, maybe you need to get in and see the braces. Maybe you've only got the top glued on, and maybe there's something that happened and you need to do something in there. Well, even while it's in this fixture, you can reach under here and work on the inside of the instrument. Sometimes it's to put a brace in. Sometimes it's, maybe you need to put a spreader in. It's not spreading perfectly, so I can reach in there and spread it out a little bit better. Why are these nails on here? The nails are for the rubber band, or my inner tube actually, to glue the top down. You get the top on there, and then you can rubber band the top down with this, or the back, whichever the case might be. Why are these end blocks on here? Well, your sides stand up higher than this, and your sides are really brittle. And the ends here, the ends can push through, and then they'll crack your side all the way around. So I put this up taller to be as tall as the side could be. That keeps the end of the side from pushing past here on the top. There's a lot of tension in those a lot of times, and while the bottom will be held perfectly, the top has still got tension and it wants to spring out. And if you accidentally bump it, for sure it's going to break and it's going to pop. So by putting these little blocks on there on the ends, they're tapered. This is a taller block than this one because the sides aren't as tall up at the neck, So anyway, that's what that's for, and it works really good. I think that's about everything I can tell you about this. Now, this one's in the shape of a dreadnought, and it's just multiple layers of, I think that's called MFD or MDF? MDF, I guess. Anyway, it's just multiple layers glued and screwed together. And that's about it. You sand it smooth and try to get it as nice as you can. I'm going to move everything from this side to that side so I don't get confused on what I've talked about. These, again, are borderline tools, but to me, they're things for holding stuff, so that's why I'm including them. You can call them a tool or a jig or a fixture. I don't care what you call it. This one is really universally handy. This goes in a big vise. You need a decent-sized vise to hold this because it's heavy, and you're going to be putting a heavy guitar on it too. And then you've got this deal here. And like you can put it could be a mandolin too. You can put the mandolin neck in here. You can I have these blocks like say I need to clamp down. I'm trying to think of why I did this. Say I want to turn it upside down and put the flat side down. Then I could do that. And then of course you'd need a pad to keep it from you always need pads to keep your clamps from making marks on your instruments. But anyway, this can be a guitar or a mandolin or whatever. And then the advantage of this one is that with this screw here, you can turn it after you get it in the vise. You can turn it upside down, turn it over, like that kind of thing. And it's got 4 sides, so you can clamp it in 4 different directions. Depending on what you're working on. You might be working on the peg head, you might be working on the body. So this one's really handy because you can get any kind of angle you want. Maybe you're putting binding on the body. So this is a very handy one. I just made it from scratch. It's, again, this one's more of a tool in a sense, but again, it's just for holding stuff, so that's why I call it a jig or a fixture. You can call it whatever you want to. But anyway, that's the elaborate one. Then I have one that's not so elaborate, much easier to make, but it works really good too, and it does give you some of the same capability. And quite honestly, I probably use this one more because sometimes I just don't need all that extra capability. But like, I've got this bent to work with mandolin necks, and then I can put this insert in here to work with guitar necks, you know, if I need to work on a guitar with this. Plus, this will give me a little bit of tilt, not very much, but it'll give you a little bit of tilt also. And then again, it's got the 4 directions that you can put it in the vise 4 different ways. And again, depending on which end of the guitar you're working on, that can be very handy. So again, I just took 2 of my least favorite C-clamps. These were Craftsman Sears clamps, and just welded them to metal. That's all I really did. Okay, I'm just grabbing them in the order they're laying here. This is a tool or jig for cutting the kerf on the for cutting the kerf on the inside of the lining there on the guitars or mandolins or whatever. And the way this works is on the bandsaw, you know, this goes in your T-slot, and you can see here where it cuts in right here, or yeah, I don't know which one it's cutting in on, I can't remember now, but you can move this back and forth. See, it's just screwed in right here, so you can move this anywhere you want to. But anyway, your blade comes in like right here, and then you have your triangle kerf laying in here, and you can cut, and you can adjust this, and like I'll put a stop that stops it. You know, like in other words, you push it in so far and it hits the stop and it can't go any further. And that way you can adjust it how thick you want to make those kerf cuts in your kerf lining. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me get a piece of the kerf lining real quick to show you. So this is a piece of the kerf lining that was made with this jig. And what you do is you just set it on here like this. You make your cut, then you slide, and then I have a line right up here that I take. So in other words, I know for sure then that the saw would be hitting right here. So it cut that kerf, then I slide it over. Then I have another line right here, and I slide the kerf over to that line, and then and that keeps them all uniform. So in other words, you have your cut mark here, and then you have a pencil line. So after you cut it, you slide it over to the pencil line, slide it over to the pencil line, slide it over, and you just keep pushing this in like that, and it'll cut it really nice and flexibly thin. See, you can tell how flexible that is. Anyway, that's all that's for, but it's a really handy jig for cutting your own kerf. I'm sure you could do it in other ways, and there's probably people that have a much better rig for that. This is just another little tool that I use for whenever I'm cutting out inlay by hand, or anything that's really detailed. So you clamp this to your tabletop, and then you put your piece of shell right here, and you have your little jeweler saw, and you just saw out your design, you know, by hand, and that just gives you a way to hold it. You can, you know, depending on the size of the piece, you slide it up tighter to the crack here. So if it's really tiny, you're all the way right up in the little crack they're working. I also learned that whenever I'm cutting something really small like that I'll take like a popsicle stick or something, and I'll use that as the hold down. I'll press down with this hand, holding it down with a popsicle stick, rather than put my finger on it, because your finger has enough flex in it that it'll as you go up, sometimes it'll lift a piece of shell and either break your it'll either break your blade or break the shell itself. So I try to hold it down with something that's a little stiffer, and rather than my finger. And plus it's less strain on your finger too. And anyway, I typically hold it down with another tight tool or of some sort. But anyway, that's you got to have these. I've got 2 or 3 of This is when I'm making mandolins again and making the neck specifically, the heel of the neck sits right here. This is the handle part of the neck. This is your peg head. And you can clamp it in here, and that's what these holes are for, is to clamp it down with a clamp. And then you can run this on the table of your bandsaw, and you can saw that crazy F5 profile out, and that gets the angle right, because the angle's like this, so you're actually sawing it out on an angle. And if you've ever noticed an F5, the point is at an angle. It goes down. It doesn't go 90 off. It goes out like that. And this helps you do that and get those angles right, is to have a jig like this. Again, most of these things, a lot of these, especially for the mandolin, came from Roger Siminoff. He's got a great book out. Again, this one's a borderline tool versus a jig or fixture, but it's still, they're all that way in my mind. This was the first thing I used to bend sides with. And you just take a propane torch, lay it in here, and let it heat this up. And then you dip your sides in water and you bend them around this. Now, I learned a long time ago that you don't just bend the wood by itself, because the wood will just snap and break right where you're trying to bend it. So you take a piece of metal, a thin piece of metal, and you put it across your side like that, and you kind of do it like you're shining shoes. You take the metal and you kind of work it like this, and the metal is pulling the side down, and that spreads the stress out rather than trying to bend it in one spot. So this heated up allows you to, bend those sides, especially for mandolins. And I've done guitars on this too. In fact, all the early guitars were done on this. So it works for anything. I hope that makes sense. This is just another little helping hand again. Let's say you're just working on the body of a guitar. You've got the neck out of it, and you need some way to hold it while you're maybe putting binding on it or repairing the back or whatever. And it would just be nice if it was held really firmly. Well, you can screw this in the V groove of the neck. You can put screws in here and right into the block of the guitar, and then you can put this in a vise. And then you can work back here on the body, and you can wrap all the way around the body and all that. It really is very handy. I don't use it very often, but every once in a while, when it really is important, I'll use this. So it's just a tool that you can use when you need to. Stuart McDonald, well, this has been highly modified. They sold this for drilling the holes in a peg head of a mandolin. Now, it originally looked pretty much like this end here, this rectangular. It was just straight like that on both ends. I sawed it down into shape. I can't remember the exact reasons why I had to make it smaller. But anyway, I did. And, over time, I thought, it's nice. It works really good. I mean, it's very accurate, all of that. But the problem is then you got to move it over to the other side, and now you got to drill those holes. And the thing about this is you think you're perfect, but you'll never be perfect. When you try to line these kinds of things up and clamp them down, it's never that great. So I just made one off of this. In other words, all this lines up perfectly. And this is much easier to align to the peg head of the mandolin. I can clamp. That's why this cutout's here. I can put a clamp here, and then there's nothing in the way down here, so I just put a clamp right here to hold the peg head, and that way I can drill all the holes at one time, and this gives me a good guide. And when I put the tuning keys in there, there's no rubbing at all. They just go in perfectly free. There's no, that's a key thing about tuning keys. If you don't get the holes perfect, then when you put your keys in there, then there's some friction on there. It makes the keys hard to turn. It just creates all kinds of problems. So you want your keys to be absolutely free through the holes. And this allows you to do that. And I actually use this as my drill guide. I actually drill down through here. and it works really good. Now, this is made out of hard maple. Maple is a good choice for something like this. You wouldn't want to make this, spend your time making this and use like spruce. It would be a silly thing to do because the spruce is going to wear out really quick. So you want to use something real tight grain wood. Maple is a really good choice because it's really hard and tight grain. I don't know. This is just a handy little outfit, jig, tool, fixture, whatever you want to call it. You can put this in the T-slot of, like, say, your bandsaw or on my sander, either one, and you put it in the T of that tool, and then you can measure from the tool, from either the sander or from the blade to a point here where you want it, and then you drill through the center of a circle, and then this makes it a circle cutter or a circle sander. So you can just you'll probably have to. In fact, I have this board on here because I have a braced board that goes down to the side of the sander and holds it, or you can put something down to the floor to hold it, and you put it on here, and then it'll cut a perfect circle. Of course, you'll have a hole in the center of your circle, so if that's important, this is not your best option. But most of the time, a little tiny hole like that doesn't matter, and but this will make a perfect circle. Then you just spin this, and it'll cut a perfect circle on your bandsaw or sand a perfect circle on your sander. And that's the name of that tune. And like I said, you can, I don't know, this is almost 2 feet from here to here. It's so you can make a 4-foot circle almost, you know what I'm saying, with this. So it gives you a lot of options on how big you want to circle. And it'll be really a perfect circle. Let's see. I thought I gave this to Caleb, and I'm sorry, Caleb, if you're watching, you should have got this. This is part for making saddles, and this is for making the radius on the saddles. And again, this goes in the T-slot of the sander, and then I put the bone saddle right here in this little cup, and I have a little side on this that helps me hold it. And then you're getting really close to the sander with this, so you got to be really careful. And then you just go like this, and that'll cut the radius on the outside of the saddle. And you can adjust it again to make it. Most of them are 12-inch radius, so that's what this is set for. And it makes a perfect radius on those saddles, 12 inches. One of my viewers sent me this. Of course, I highly modified it to make it work better for me. I also added leather padding right here. This is for pulling necks out of a guitar. And I put leather padding on here. I think I put this steel bar on here. I'm not sure if it came with that or not. I kind of think I put that on there. Because to me, this part that's lifting the heel, you don't want no flex in that. You want this solid as a brick. And so I put a fairly thick piece of steel there and a pad, and then you can just start tightening this. And of course your fretboard can go through here, or if you've got the fretboard off, you can see your dovetail and all that right here. But anyway, this, you can just keep lifting. You tighten this down around the body, and then you just keep lifting until it comes out. Now, generally, you don't do this dry. You're doing it with steam or something like that. Now, I know a lot of people the next question is, have you tried the dry heat method? Well, I have, and I don't like it at all. I like the steam method. The steam method, there's nothing wrong with steam. Why do we need to fix something that's now broken? Steam works great, and especially works great with Titebond. Titebond will turn loose in a heartbeat with steam. It just turns milky white and comes loose. That's why pulling a neck out of a pocket that's glued with Titebond is really easier than with the hide glue. It will melt quicker than the hide glue will, I guarantee you. It turns loose really easily with steam. So that's why I say glue your necks in with Titebond, and you'll be your own best friend. They won't come loose ever, but if you need to get them loose, you can get them loose real easy. This, I'd almost like to just leave this as a mystery and see if you can guess what this is. It's got lines cut in here. And so there's a reason for those lines. So something travels through those lines. And since it wouldn't be for water, it's air. And there's a hose connection right here where you can plug in a hose right here. And this goes inside the vacuum bag. And like if I'm gluing a laminate neck together, and maybe there's, I don't know, 7 pieces or something, you know, I've got them stacked up on top of here. Then I wrap them with cellophane, stack it on top of here. And that way the air can get drawn out on all the way around it that way. This, you know, allows it to draw all the air out by having these little lines and stuff. And that vacuum bags really are the best way on the planet to glue up multiple laminations, like for a neck or whatever you're doing. So that's what that's for. Speaking of necks, this is the jig, again, from Roger Siminoff that I use for gluing up the neck angle on a mandolin. It gets it very accurate. This is kind of the replacement bridge, if you will. You know, you have to know the exact height, and I monkeyed with that for years to get it just exactly right. And if you could see it, this is actually on a taper. The belly of the mandolin is laying here. You know, the top is laying here, and it's got the curve, and it's got a slight tapered angle this way to fit that belly perfectly. The lines are very faint, but there are lines there where the neck lays in that spot right there. I even just lightly dished out this area here. This is the heel of the neck. Of course, the heel's pointed up, but my point is that's the end of the neck right there, and I just didn't want that touching, just to make sure it didn't, you know, screw up anything. So this way I've got the neck down really flat right up here, and I'll put a clamp right here and a clamp right here on the neck and hold it down really flat to a good flat table. And then when I put the neck in, I know that the angle's going to be perfect, you know. So that's what that is. This weird little outfit, and I got quite a few of these, are just handy things for clamping on round surfaces, like the large bout of a guitar. Say you need to pull it together. Well, often you can do that with one clamp, or sometimes you can do it with one clamp just across there, like a bar clamp or something. But sometimes it needs more pressure than that, and you need more clamping area. And so you can put this on either side of the guitar. In other words, you put one on one side of the guitar, the other one on the other side of the guitar, then you put a bar clamp from here to there and from here to there, and you pull it together, and this really works really well. And I have these in different sizes, different shapes. But the reason that it doesn't come all the way out here is it starts to get pretty wide. So I can use smaller clamps by setting this off a little bit, you know, shorter clamps, I guess you'd say. So it works out really well. When I'm building violins, this is my go-to jig, fixture, clamp, whatever you want to call it. And again, these holes are for putting C-clamps in here. And you know, you bend your sides, and then you have little corner blocks that go in there, and then your body point comes around like this and comes around like this and comes out to a point. Well, you have a block in here that mimics that point. And so, you know, you can glue your sides to those little blocks. Then later you got to cut the blocks down, you know, make them a lot smaller, but you can do that after the sides are all glued up to the blocks. You have a neck block up here and a tail block down here. And anyway, that's the name of that tune. This, again, from Roger Siminoff. Now, I don't make dovetails in my mandolins. I never did. I just did it the way I saw in his first book. And honestly, I like it better than a dovetail. And I know how to make dovetails. You've seen me do it a gazillion times on guitars. But on my mandolins, after I saw how he did it on his first thing, I thought, why would I want to change to a dovetail? It's 100% never going to come loose. Not ever. And so what I do is you lay your, this is where you put your mandolin body here. Now this is just sides at this point. You don't have, let let me think about this. Am I telling you true? You do have your I'm having a, yeah, you do have your top on it, but your top is facing up. So you got your side setting on here, and you run this in, you run this into your bandsaw, and then this tilt angle right here, from this angle to here is the angle you want, and this angle from here to here on your table. So you run it in flat, and then you start tilting it, running it in, 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 running it in. And then basically you got a bunch of slices in there. Then you break all the slices out, and that V groove is, and then I make the same V groove on the back of the neck. And then on the bottom side of the neck, then I drill through this and through the neck block, 2 holes on either side. And so I'm drilling right down through the joint of that. And then I put dowel pins in there and glue them in. There is no, and of course the whole neck's glued in too. And there is no way that's ever coming loose. And some people would, argue then, of course, you do this before you do set the angle. So this is how you cut the angle and all that with this, but then you set the angle with that other jig I told you about, and when you actually glue it in. And then after it's set in that other jig and glued in overnight or whatever, then you drill the dowel pin holes and it locks it in place. And there's no way that's ever going to come loose or loosen up or bend or move or anything. Some people will try to argue that, you still need to adjust it. No, if you do it right, you'll never need to adjust it. It's there forever. And the only way it's ever going to move or have a problem is if it gets totally crushed and busted. If that happens, who cares? You're going to have to rebuild everything anyway, so it doesn't matter. And it's not ever going to be a problem, I promise you. Especially if you glue it with Titebond. If you glue it with hide glue, it's going to break loose eventually. I don't care what you glue with hide glue. I don't care what you glue with hide glue, and I can't say that strong enough. It's going to break eventually. And I don't even mean that as a slap to hide glue. I'm just telling you that's the way that stuff works. That's how the good old boys stay in business. They glue everything with hide glue, and then they know they're going to get to fix it again later in their career. It's just the way it is, because it always breaks. It always breaks. It doesn't sometimes break. It will always break. There's not a Stradivari violin out there in the whole world that hasn't been fixed hundreds of times, or at least dozens of times. Not a single one. Every one of them's been fixed and repaired dozens of times. This is for... I use it mostly for putting binding on guitar necks. This is just kind of the shape of your average guitar neck, if you will. And you can slide your ebony piece in here, and then you can put your binding on the sides. And the harder you push it in, the tighter it gets. And then sometimes it won't be the exact shape. And so then you can slide little wedges in here and stuff and tighten it up. But it's just a real handy way to glue the binding on the sides of a guitar neck. Works really good for me. And again, it's that kind of cutting board plastic, if you will, that's real slick. Delrin or whatever it is. And I just broke everything, so hang on a second. Yeah, that was good. I just kept piling it up on top of each other. Anyway. And then you saw this one yesterday, so I'm not going to go through this one in much detail, other than to say this is my go-to jig if I'm working on intonation, for setting up the slot in the bridge. So this is how I saw that slot very accurately. And then, of course, this is part of that intonation setup too. And this is just a piece of wire that I can hang on the back of where the guitar end pin is. You can hang this on there. This goes up over the top of the guitar, and you can hold your 2 outer strings on this, and then you can float that bridge around until you get those 2 outer strings noting perfectly. Then you mark it. Then you use this jig to cut the slot exactly in that spot. If you do it like that, you can't hardly be wrong. I mean, it's pretty hard to screw that up. I mean, it's not hard to screw up the slot. I mean, you can make that a mess all day long because you're doing it with a router, and like I told you yesterday, the pucker factor is just incredibly high on that. You just breathe wrong and you screwed it up. I mean, seriously, it's really hard to do, which is why the factories don't do it. Of course, the factories could do it with some sort of a CNC thing probably if they wanted to, and figure out a way to do it to much more accurate than what they're doing. But they don't care. They've got their exact plans and exact sizes, and they just put it in place and do it, and they just call that good enough. And you know, it sort of is good enough. But if you're going to have to do it from scratch, like I often do, because the bridge is broke or the bridge is pulled loose or whatever, so I'm trying to make it better. Why put it back like the factory did if the factory isn't perfect? Might as well put it back perfect. It takes a little more work, a little more effort, but perfect's way better than close, That's everything I know today. Probably way more than you wanted to know. Okay, let's see here. We got a lot of people on here. 161 people. Rod was back to his he's back to his first place there. So Rod was first to get in there before we went live, and then Dottie was right there. And Carolyn Fike, as often is the case, and this thing just won't let go. I've got my I must have pressed on my wheel and it's locked the scrolling in here. It won't let me get off of that. Okay, there, I got it off, I think. It's not easy being me. Just looking for question marks mainly. Clyde Price says, good morning, Jerry. Was wondering if you could take us along on one of your trips to town sometime. I think the viewers would enjoy that. Well, we might try that a little bit. We'll see what happens there. That's not a bad idea, Clyde. Thank you. Yolanda's Music. I know who she is. She's the roller derby queen. Good morning from a cold and chilly Pennsylvania. I got on too early. I forgot about the 1 hour time difference. Wow. What are you doing in Pennsylvania? Doing a roller derby tournament? Oh my goodness. Anyway, moving on down. Do I see any more question marks? Spot 31, it looks like. I got a little, speaking of spots, I got spots in front of my eyes. I get those floaters, and that's why it's hard for me to see this. Otherwise, I could see it pretty good. Morning, Jerry. What's your take on JR's Bigfoot story? I knew this was going to come up. I knew it was going to come up. Have you ever had a similar experience? Well, Matt, his friend that was with him during some of those experiences, quote unquote, doesn't believe it's Bigfoot at all, not even that much. Matt doesn't, he's just exactly like me. He says there ain't no such thing and it ain't happening. And that's the way I feel about it. And I say this with real, again, take it as a brag, take it as conceited, take it any way you want to take it. It's just factual to me. I have spent as much time in the woods as just about anybody there is, hunting, deer and turkeys and squirrels and you name it. I've been in the woods, coyotes, the whole bit. And I've done it just about as much as anybody. The only people that would do it more would be your real professional hunters that put out the videos and things. Otherwise, I've been out there as much as anybody. Black and white guarantee you. And probably more than 90% of your hunters that you know. Because every single weekend from the time I was about, 16 to the time I was about 32, somewhere in there, every weekend I was out there hunting. Every weekend. So, I mean, and I didn't see this much of Bigfoot. And I sat silent in the woods for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. So there you go. It ain't happening. And I don't think down deep that JR really thinks it is either. I really don't. I know he comes across like he believes that it's true, but Down deep, I don't think he really does. I think he just wants it to be true so bad that he just keeps trying to perpetuate the stories and the myth and stuff. That's really what I believe. That's truly what I believe. Bill Webb, I tried using cork on my homemade violin clamps. Not sure it'll work. Too thin. Next batch, I'll use leather. Yeah, well, I have some cork gasket material after you said that about cork. And it's pretty thick. It's pretty darn thick stuff. It would work, I am positive. Well, I shouldn't say I'm positive. The only negative of the cork is that it's going to be more brittle, and it's likely to chip and break over time, and chunks of it will break off. I'm sure that could happen also. The leather, if you put leather on there, pretty much you'll never have to address it again. Leather's going to last a long, 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 long time. What I did to get my original leather, I had some old thick leather belts, and I just cut circles out of them. That's where I got my original leather. If you're looking for leather and you don't have any. Jeff Puris, Jerry needs to get us tour of Culver Props in Rolla. Yeah, I could do that. That's not a bad idea, really. He was the guy that started that, Gene Smith. He was a good friend of mine. He was quite a bit older than me. In fact, almost old enough to be my dad, really. And maybe he was, now I think about it. But anyway, regardless, he was a genius. The guy was a flippin' absolute 100% mechanical genius. I'm not, you can't state it strong enough. He was the only guy, other than my dad originally, and then later there was a Don Kaler who was just like Gene Smith. But after I moved down here, Gene Smith was the only person that I ever called if I couldn't figure something out. Now, there was no point in calling anybody else. No point in it, because nobody else is going to know. If I can't figure it out, then almost anybody else that I would have called they're not going to know. They're just going to be guessing. But you call Gene and you'd say, Gene, here's the problem. I've got this 1951 John Deere, and it's sparking like this, or it's doing this, or it's doing that. And he'd go, well, take this thing and put this there, and put that wire on such and so, and ground it over there, and you'll be fine. And he knew everything about machines and equipment and motors, and you couldn't stump him. I mean, you couldn't stump him. He would take Volkswagen car engines, 4-cylinder engines, cut them in half, and build a 2-cylinder engine for his planes out of them. The guy was an absolute flippin' genius. I'm not kidding you. He also had a bunch of patents. He patented some kind of giant charcoal machine and sold that patent to some company in South America. He was just a genius, just an absolute genius. He was on the cover of the Oshkosh magazine up in, that big, huge fly-in that everybody comes from all over the world to Oshkosh. They had him on the cover of the magazine one year as Innovator of the Year. The guy, I can't use genius enough. I'm seriously telling you, you never met anybody like this guy. He was just incredible. And he built, he couldn't get a pilot license anymore. He crop dusted for many, many years, and then he started having heart attacks. Well, then he couldn't get a pilot's license anymore. So he started building ultralights. And he built some of the coolest ultralight airplanes on the planet. And he named it the Backyard Flyer. And he could take off in the shortest amount of distance. I mean, he called it Backyard Flyer because you could just fly right out of your backyard, And if you look out there on YouTube and you type in Gene Smith Backyard Flyer, you'll find a lot of his clips. Just the coolest guy ever. Just so cool. And, you would think, well, then how did he die? Well, he was getting old. He was in his 80s, and so I'm thinking any day you're going to hear about him cracking up one of his ultralights, right? He didn't. He fell out of the bucket of a high lift. Somebody was lifting him up in the bucket, or he was already up in the bucket, and I think the bucket was still, as far as I know, and he was trimming a tree or something, and somehow he slipped, fell over the side of the bucket, hit on the ground. His last words were, "I'm dying now," and he did. He just, bad deal. Paul Lanier, left-handed thumb picks are available through Blue Chip. Okay. I didn't know that, but it's good to know, I guess. Let's see. Steve is asking a question there, but he has no question marks. It says, do you like artists like Molly Tuttle? Oh, she's killer. She's just flat killer. Yeah, she's really good. All those people are so talented. The ones that you see just repeated out there on YouTube, they are all so good. I'm not even a pimple, I'm compared to those guys. I'm like nothing. They are so good at what they do. Dottie Hildebrand, hey, Spot 31, I like the part of the JR story where the other guy and JR were hiding behind the guy with the crutches. Yeah, Matt had his gun with him, concealed carry. So, it wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't one of those tweakers out there in the woods, those guys that are on drugs and stuff. That wouldn't surprise me. When JR starts telling me these tales, all I say to him is, yeah, it had to be Bigfoot. There's no other explanation. I couldn't think of any other way to explain it. That's what I say to him. He knows I just think it's just full of crap. I don't buy it for a second. Peter Laubach, good morning from Germany. That guy with the Zoom H6, okay? And I think that's a type of microphone, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I don't know. I can't remember. I get so many emails, and I saw that email from that fella, I think. And thank you for that, by the way, Peter. But I'm still it's got to be simple. That's the first criteria. It's got to be super simple. If I got to put extra boards in, got to do all those other things, I'm not really interested. I mean, if I have to do that eventually, I might do that, but I'm not giving in. I'm not throwing in the towel till I've exhausted every possible way to make the microphone situation simple. I like simple. I got enough complexity in my life, trust me. And I think you guys know that already. There's just too much already. Let's see, moving on. Papa Tom updated my profile picture with my 96 Martin. Cool. Well, let's see. Bill Mumbo, the best jig is an Irish jig. Yeah, that's probably true. Paul Akers, how did you connect the carbuncles on the mandolin jig to the wood? I've tried different ways to do this, internal clamps and stuff. I did it the way that Roger Semenoff showed in his book. You can see how they're just bolts through there like that. That makes it really solid. You can see I had to route out for that. And I think he probably showed routing out for that too. I don't know. But that gets it more in the center so that it, if you put it on the edge, well, then it's always slightly cocked. It's not really. So you want to make it as center pushing as you can. And that's what I did there. And I don't remember if he showed that part or not, but he probably did. I probably copied it pretty close to exactly from him. Let's see. Moving on. Roy Livingston. Morning, Jerry. Do you have a log splitter or are you the log splitter? Well, I am the log splitter sometimes. But no, I built a really nice one. There's some videos out there on YouTube about it. It hooks up to the front of my Bobcat. And I think mine is superior over any of the other Bobcat ones that I've seen. I really do. Like I told you, there's no excuse for a poor design. And I designed it one way the first time, and that wasn't good enough. So, like I'm saying, by the time it would hit the market, it should be perfect. So now I think I could build the perfect log splitter and sell it to the market if I wanted to. But again, I don't want to be rich, so I don't do things like that. But matter of factly, Anyway, no, I got a nice big cylinder. I think it's a 5-inch with a 2-inch rod, or 2.5-inch rod maybe. I can't remember. It's a big one, pretty heavy duty. And I found an I-beam. The story of finding that I-beam is the funny story, and I'll try to tell it as quick as possible. But I drove one day. I drove all over Missouri, and there's no doubt I drove 500 miles, and I'm not exaggerating, looking for an I-beam. I went to all these different steel places. I went to welding shops. I went to everywhere I could think of. Couldn't find one. All day long. It was just before dark. I was heading back. At that time, the gravel quarry was still running right here at the beginning of our road. I thought, what I got to lose? Might as well stop it and ask them. Stop it and ask them. Sure enough, they had one exactly the right length, exactly the right size, everything. 2 miles from the house. I'd been driving 500 miles all day long and found it. But anyway, so I got this big heavy I-beam steel. The cylinder's mounted on one end of that, and it's underneath this I-beam steel. So my Bobcat grabs a hold of it, and the I-beam steel is up on top. The ramrod is down below, and on the end of the ramrod, I just have a big flat plate that follows the I-beam. So the flat plate is connected to the I-beam, and it follows that and goes in and out based on the cylinder. And then on the cutter end, on the other end, on the far end of the I-beam, then I have a real heavy, massive steel blade coming down. It's a big, thick thing. It's like 2.5 inches thick, sharpened down to a knife edge. And then, about halfway down on that, maybe not quite halfway down, maybe like 6 inches down on that, because this is a big piece of steel. So about maybe 5 or 6 inches down on that, then I have a cross piece of steel welded on that, sharpened to a knife blade. So it makes an X. It splits it 4 ways, in other words. The beauty of the way I made it was that this flat piece that's pushing the log into the cutter, it's long also. So if I only want to split it twice, well, then I just come down on the end of that. I go below the cross, if you will, and I can split the log 2 ways, or like say it's a giant log, I can split it in half, and then I can take those halves and split them in half again, and split them in half again, and then when they get small enough, then I pick up the small piece that's maybe this big, and I split it 4 ways. And I can do it just with the buttons there on the Bobcat, and you can do it really fast. I mean, it's really fast. So what I do is once I get it to the 4-way size, and sometimes they're already 4-way size, like when you cut down a small tree this big, you can split that 4 ways right away. So anyway, I run that in to the cross thing there where it's going to split it, and then I lift it up and I put it over my dump trailer, and I split it 4 ways, drop it directly into my trailer. So I never touch it. I mean, I sawed it off, and that was the only time I kind of touched it. I didn't really touch it then. I just sawed it off with my chainsaw. Then I take the Bobcat, I pick it up, go over the trailer, and split it 4 ways. Then I back the trailer up right next to the furnace, and it's got an automatic dump on it, so I just push the button to dump that. The only time I touch the wood in those circumstances is when I throw it inside the wood furnace. Now, that sounds wonderful, and it is wonderful. It really is. It's really great. But most of the logs around here, I don't even have to split them to throw them in that big furnace. So I just cut them up to the appropriate length and just chuck them in there. So that's good and bad. That means it's more manual work for me because I'm not splitting them. So, but I don't really want to split them really tiny, so I'd rather have them fairly large. So, but when I get into big wood, then I do use the splitter every time. And it really is very easy to use, and it works really good. And I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I've said I can't find anything that will stall that. I mean, it goes straight through anything. And if it doesn't split it, it just saws it right off. You can just see it just cut it right off. It'll go right through the crotch of a tree and cut it right off. It'll go through the biggest limb and cut it right off. It doesn't care. It just cuts it right off. It's awesome. So anyway, that's the name of that tune. Now I got to find where I'm at again. Okay. Carolyn Fike, we can't see, raise things up. Sorry about that. I'd already done. I thought I was holding them up high enough. Well, sorry. I hope it didn't. If there's any particular thing you want to see again, say it and I'll hold it up. I'm sorry. Now it's jumped up on me there. Zappa says, have you no imagination? Well, see, didn't you see my last video I put out? That one on the Bill's guitar? I told you we have a Magicam. That's what we were using there, because a Magicam is that you use your imagination. And because I didn't have the camera pointed down a couple of times on that guitar. Sorry about that. Moving on. Dottie, Jerry, I'm truly amazed that you build tools or necessity to work on guitars of mandolins and whatever. You, my friend, are one talented guy. Well, thank you. I passed on probably another 10 or 20 items here in the shop because, quite frankly, I couldn't even remember why I made them. Because a lot of times I make something for one-time use. I could just use it one time, and then I'll just set it over out of the way and maybe never use it again, And a lot of times, I could remember what they were for, but nowadays, I don't remember what they were for. I look at it and go, I mean, I kind of got a vague idea what I would have used it for, but I don't remember using it. But there's a lot of things like that here, too. You guys, seriously, if you were here, you could go through drawers and cabinets, and all day long, you'd be going, what's this? What's that for? How do you use this? You'd be surprised. There's a ton of stuff. But those are the things I showed you are the more common things, the things that I use a lot, and the go-to jigs and fixtures, if you will. Ben Boyd, Martin HD28 arriving today from Sweetwater. They said wait 24 hours before opening. Do you agree? It's not a bad idea. It's just like I told you about extremes. You don't want extremes. And because it's going to be shipped out in the cold, it's not a bad idea to just wait and open it when it's, had time to acclimate. That was the main problem that guy had with all the firecrackers. That's what kind of started it, if you will, or maybe that wasn't even what started it with that guy. You don't know. But anyway, he brought the guitar in out of like 14 below, 14, 15 below, whatever it was he said. I forgot now. But anyway, it was like that. And he brings it in, opens up the case, sets the guitar right next to the wood stove. What a moron. You don't do extremes with instruments, period. Zero, none, not any. There's not a single extreme that you can do that would make sense with an instrument. You can't, you don't want to leave them in the sun. That's extreme. You don't want to leave them in, ice cold. That's extreme. You don't want to leave them in super hot attic. That would be extreme. You don't want to leave them in a super damp location. That's extreme. Super dry locations, extreme. So anything that's extreme, you just don't do. So it's not a bad practice to let it acclimate once it gets shipped during this time of the year. Now, if it was in the spring or fall, I'd probably say, yeah, you're open. It's no problem. But in this time and it depends where you are in the country. I mean, if you're up north, for sure, I'd let it set and acclimate, And if you're down in Florida, maybe not. I don't know. It just depends. It really just depends. And you'll have to be the one that makes that judgment call. Yeah, Paul Aker says, I breathe wrong on a saddle slot, start over. Yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. And see, the problem with it is, the way I do it, it's already glued to the top of the guitar. You got major problems if you mess that up. Yeah, that's why the factories don't do it. I mean, it's just black and white. That's why they don't do it. And it makes all kinds of sense that they shouldn't do it in the factories. I'm not picking at them. I wouldn't do it either if I had a factory, and I was pumping out 100 guitars a day, because you would instantly go from 100 guitars in one day down to about 5, unless you had a whole bunch of people doing that. So it doesn't make sense to do it on a mass scale, but it makes a total sense, in my opinion, if you're doing it on your own. Why is the bridge never attached to the mandolin? I changed my strings for the first time last month, and even though I was expecting it, it was still a shock to see. Well, mandolins and violins and, all the violin family instruments, they all have movable bridges. And as I often say, now it's not so much on a mandolin, but on violins and cellos and all that, if they're set up correctly, then they're instantly ready to fall apart. I mean, if they have been set up perfectly, then they're ready to fall apart. Because every single thing on violins, cellos, violas, the whole bit, all of it is held by friction and nothing but friction. The bridge on the mandolin is friction. Now, it's not that hard to set the bridge where it needs to go. It takes a little practice. If you're brand new at it, probably all you want to try to do at first is tighten up your top G string and your bottom E string, and you don't even have to bring those up to full pitch. In fact, I would recommend you don't. I would recommend that you bring them, like, instead of bringing that G up to a G, drop it down to like an E or something, and the E down there, instead of an E, drop it down to like a D, and just tune those two strings and get your bridge located. Check it at the 12th fret. Make sure the note is still the same. Like you note it, and you get your, like I said, the tuned down E on the top, and make sure it's an E. And then when you press the 12th fret down, make sure it's an E also. Then on your bottom string, which would normally be E, you've dropped it down to a D, a dog, D dog. So you open tune it to D, then press down at your 12th fret, get it to a D. Now, if that's perfect, then go ahead and start tuning up the rest of the instruments, all the while making sure the bridge isn't pulling forward, because they do that. They always pull forward as you start putting all the tension on it. So as you do a little bit of tensioning, take your fingers and keep the bridge straightened up. Tension, bridge straightened up. Check your intonation as you're going. It's a process. You can't do it in 5 seconds. It's a process. But in the future, when you change the strings on a mandolin, I do them in pairs. I'll do the 2 Gs and the 2 Ds and the 2 As and the 2 Es or whatever. It doesn't matter what order you do them in, but I just do it kind of like in pairs for the most part. But even then, you still want to make sure you're keeping your bridge straight. Bridges will always want to pull forward on a mandolin, and really they do on your violin or anything. The bridges always want to walk forward at the top, so you want to keep pulling that top back, and you'll learn a method to get a hold of it, and you can, even under full tension, you can straighten it up once you learn how. But you got to be really careful too, because under full tension, if you just pulled it too far, bang, it'll kick out, and the whole thing it's not pretty. So be real careful when you do it. Hope that helps you. Moving on here. Well, actually, it must have scrolled again. Oh, man, where did it go? Okay, here we go. Thomas Armstrong, wondering why there's never discussion on the shelf life of glues is such an integral part of lutherie business. Well, Thomas, if I look at it and it don't look good, I throw it out. But if it looks good, I use it. I don't have a particular shelf life on my, like on Type Bond and stuff. And there probably supposedly is, but I've never had a problem. And I'm going to say this one more time, and it's going to sound like a brag, and I'm too bad. It's just a fact, and that is, as far as I know, I don't know everything, but as far as I know, I have never, not one single time in 40 years, not ever, not one time, had a glue joint fail that was glued with Type Bond. Not one. You can't say that about hide glue. In fact, I didn't use hide glue very much, but every glue joint I ever glued with hide glue already has failed. Now that ought to tell you something. Do what you want. Use hide glue if you want. I don't care. That's your business. I'm just telling you I wouldn't use it if it was me. There's way better choices, and Stradivari himself would look at you and go, what kind of idiot are you using hide glue today? Don't you know there's better glues? I guarantee you would, because he always used the best of everything that was out there. Everything. He didn't compromise. He only had the choice of hide glue back in the 1600s. He didn't have any other choice. And I'd have been using it back then too. And probably still complaining about it. Yolanda's music. You guys love to hear me rant. Yolanda's music. We are up here in Pennsylvania for Mark's cancer. Ooh, boy, that's not good. Roller derby tournaments this time. No roller derby tournaments this time. Also, I'm now the proud owner of a bruised knee due to the practice. Yeah, what'd the other person look like? Oh, I'm sorry about the cancer scan thing. Tell Mark I'm praying for him, man. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Chipwood, do keep all your wedges or make them as you need them. I have coffee cans full of different types of wedges. Yeah, I keep them all in a little bowl here. That's about all I have, but it's generally about all I need, and I do make them every once in a while when I need more or something. But I do go over and sharpen them on the sander. I'll just hold them on the sander and re-sharpen them, and because they'll get glue on them over time and stuff. And I just re-sharpen them and reuse them all the time. Wedges, I probably could have included that in the jigs and fixtures for this morning. Of course, again, it's a tool, but it's the same kind of thing. It's for holding something in a particular spot or a place. And wedges are crazy powerful, way more powerful than the average person would ever dream they are. You can move a whole house with a wedge. I mean, you can literally do it. I mean, you drive a wedge in, and as long as it's a solid wedge, something's going to move. Wedges are crazy powerful. Bill Webb, Jerry, I was sanding the edges even, and the cork chipped off perfectly bad. Leather worked much better. Yeah, I would say for sure I would do the leather. Like I said, it's a permanent thing, the leather is. The cork would probably work in most cases, but the leather is absolutely permanent. Chuck Hybrider, like to write notes on my jigs for critical measurements and sometimes make a story stick to repeat the setups on. Story sticks are great. If you don't know what they are, what's the other name they used to call those? Story stick, I've heard it called that, but I was thinking there's another name that my father-in-law, he was a master carpenter. In fact, I'm not kidding about this. I think he held 8 different cards. He held a welder's card. He was in the union, and he held a carpentry card and plumbing and electrical. I mean, he held every card there was, I think. I might be wrong about the number, but he held a lot of cards. And he was like that. He was the one talking about the story stick all the time, and seemed like he had a different name for it, though, than story stick. There was another name. But anyway, if you don't know what a story stick is, it's instead of using a tape measure or something repeatedly, and you're doing the same thing over and over, you have a stick, and maybe one end of the stick butts up to something, and the other or the other place on the stick, you got a mark, and you keep using that same mark or something like that. I mean, there's different ways you can do it or implement it, but it's basically that's what it is. The spoken song. Whenever I see a great picker, I just want to bust up my guitar and use it. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. Like when I watch somebody like Sierra Hull, it's like, why am I even trying? You know, I'll never be able to play like that. Not ever. If I practiced every single day for 1,000 years, I could never do what she does on a mandolin. The Freeze. Jerry, did you ever play with a bucket and waxed string, aka dumb bull? I don't guess. I mean, I've had lots of, if you're talking about like the bass thing, I've had lots of people over the years sit in on a jam with a wash tub and a pole and a string. I mean, if that's what you're talking about. Otherwise, I don't know what you're talking about. 19 Bryn 76. Did you ever come across McKinsey and Marr guitars? Any opinions? No, I'm sorry, I don't know anything about those, unfortunately. Hugh O'Connor, if you are seriously thinking about giving up music, which I doubt, but possibly not playing in public in the future, I understand your position. Best to give up rather than hating the subject. Yeah, there's just a whole lot of reasons why I'm about ready to just call it quits. There's just a bunch. Simon Jardine, hi from Scotland. Jerry, if you told us before I've forgotten, sorry, what is the water wheel going to power? It's just for looks mostly. It's just, oh, isn't that cute when you pull in the driveway? Pretty much is really all it is. If it, during certain times of the year, you could use it for power. There's no question. I'm sure about that. And if I decide to do that, I've made a generator out of a washing machine that I will probably power some electrical thing, probably just lights or something. And maybe, I was thinking maybe of powering a small fountain to blow water up out of the pond, something like that. Maybe. These are just maybes. But mostly it's just there for looks. That's all it's going to be for, really. But it is neat that it's pretty much a perpetual motion thing in the sense that water pretty much always flows out that spring. From that standpoint, it kind of is a perpetual motion, but then again, the reason that it's not really technically perpetual motion is the spring can dry up. And any water source could dry up or change course or something, and that's why you can't call that a perpetual motion thing. Hugh O'Connor, if you are serious... Oh, okay, I've read that one. Daddy Hildebrand, just think if you raise the microphone up, it will do much better, or hang from the ceiling. But what do I know? Well, I do have it raised up quite a bit higher this morning here. I've got it up another 5 or 6 inches. Hopefully it's coming through right now. And I plan to try that when we do play again live the next time, and hopefully that'll help. I kind of think you're right on that. Never thought about it before, but I got so much stuff on my mind when we're trying to get this stuff ready. I don't really think about every single aspect. The Freeze. I figured that Bigfoot was a dumb bull. Okay. I don't know what that means either. Sometimes this stuff just goes right over my head. Jerry, is it good idea to put paste wax on the leather of the clamps, of the bobbin clamps? Yeah, maybe. I don't know about that. I would say no. I don't think so, because you'll be surprised. It's that kind of clamp with very little activity will want to slide off the side of the guitar. A lot of the guitars are slightly, just slightly curved at the edges anyway, and so as you tighten them down, they're wanting to slide off anyway. So anything you do to make them slicker is not a good idea on this. That's why I say just use raw leather, and it'll be probably your best overall. Brian O'Grady, Jerry, do you find time goes a lot quicker as you get old? Oh, absolutely. And someone, recently called me and told me why that was. And they said, when you're young, and I mean, it sort of makes sense, but I don't know if it's 100% the way I think about it, but it's kind of makes sense. When you're young and you're 10 years old, a year is 10% of your life, and now when you're 70 and a year is only a very tiny percentage of your life, and I'm not going to do the math, but my point is and so he's right in that regard, and that's probably why it does seem like it goes so much faster. But boy, it does. It truly seems like it just like a year seems like it's about a month long these days to me. It really does. It's crazy. I can't believe that in just a very short while I'll be out hunting mushrooms again. And I love to do that. Right now I'm hunting antlers. But I forgot to mention that Sadie and I went on a little antler hunt yesterday. We didn't find anything though. Okay, moving on down. Got a couple more to go through, and then we're going to call this good. And again, I've gone way too long. Lon, Jerry, do you offer a one-on-one help via video for fixing, doing adjustments? Yes. If somebody wants to do a Zoom call, you can let me know. And the problem is I don't check my emails very regularly, so hopefully you're not in a super hurry. But anyway, I try to check them. But anyway, if you want to do a Zoom call, you can send me an email, and hopefully, and then and if I didn't get back to you quick enough, hopefully in the daily vlog you can put a comment there. Hey, I sent you an email about a Zoom call. Could you check? And I'll be glad to check it out. I don't mean to ignore anybody. It's just that because I've really kind of cut this out as being a business at this point, retiring and all that, I just got lots of other stuff I got to be doing. So yeah, I'd be happy to do a Zoom call with anybody if anybody wants to do that. And I charge. The free Zoom calls are 40 minutes. They cut you off at 40 minutes. And I charge, if we go the whole 40 minutes, I mean, the maximum I would charge would be $50. I'm pretty lenient on that. I don't think I've charged anybody $50 yet, but my point is just, I'm not trying to get rich on it, but I do want to pay for my time too, because it is, I got a lot to do. The freeze. Tie the through in the center of the... Okay, he's talking about the bucket thing again. I'm not really sure I know what we're talking about there, but I'm just going to let that pass. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here today, and 157 viewers are still hanging in there. I think I'm wearing everybody out, so we'll get back with you tomorrow for something. Hopefully it'll be something worthwhile. We'll see you then.